stepping into being a writer, how did you build the world of the 18th century in this novel, and what were the real challenges of writing it?
Well, I mean, by the time I'd gotten to do it, which I say 2020, I was immersed in the 18th century. I knew quite a lot about it and what it looked like and felt like, and I didn't have a lot of trouble with that. What I really wanted to do was just not make him a 20th or 21st century man. Not give him the sensibilities of somebody who knows a lot of stuff about race and Africa even. He doesn't know anything about Africa. He's got as much of an idea about Africa as any ignorant person living in Britain. And that was important for him to learn whilst I was going through his life, for him to learn slowly, and for him not to be this heroic figure. He's very flawed, he's very vain. He's very pompous. He loves the fact that he's got learning. He wields his words. He doesn't mess about with mythologies. He throws them everywhere. You know, he's flash. You know, once somebody stopped him on the street, and this is noted, documented. He was walking by, and these two young fashionables, as they say, fashionables, dandies, they went, smoke Othello. And apparently he rounded on them, put his hand on his big paunch and said, "Aye, sirs, such Othellos you meet with but once in a century. Such Iagos as you we meet with in every dirty passage. Proceed, sirs." That's a man who, once you get into that, you think, I've got to give him his due. I can't be being all that sort of thing. He is out there. And that's kind of how I think he was built in the novel. He learns to be that man, and I wanted him to grow into that. So it's a novel of triumph in some ways, even those awful things that happen in it too, because he survives it and he becomes the man that I know from his letters.
And from these letters, you've built a character that is so colourful. And if I may, you've expressed that, part of the reason why you delved into this really, this black history before 1948 is because as an actor, you had this desire to star in costume dramas. And of course, being a black actor, there's these exclusions because, with these costume dramas, it's like, well, back in those periods, there were only white people in England. But now, we have a series like Bridgerton, which, people have various opinions of, which kind of, retcon the ethnicities of figures from British history, particularly in this exact same kind of Georgian period, putting black and Asian people there in different positions. But with the creation of this character and the possibility of digging back into the archives, can you imagine a renaissance of a kind of like black English figures who could perhaps be brought to stage, to screen, to different forms? Where else do you imagine yourself taking the character of Sancho, or even discovering and bringing new characters to life as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've probably possessed in some way by Sancho. So I'll probably keep doing things on him the rest of my life. But there are other people in history that I'm interested in, and other centuries that I'm interested in. So I don't know that I'll write much more on him, but I might, if I get a chance, try to take him to the screen. But we're in a world where Bridgerton is the Death Star, and no other period drama will be made for the next decade until they stop making it. It's true. And I've got wonderful friends who are in it, and I love it as a cartoon, but it is this thing of saying, oh, black people were just like around London, just like hanging out, Like, no. There were some, but that wasn't the majority. So when I went to tour America, one of the most shocking things, I'm in Brooklyn, I'm at the Kennedy Center, I'm in Harlem, at the National Black Theatre there, and I get these Q&As, and every time, and these are smart people. I'm not talking about people who are like don't know anything. Are there other black people in England? Yes, there are. So obviously I can't go, what are you talking about, you fool? It's the audience, they paid money, so I'm nice to them. But I also get, did England have slavery? Like, I mean, you try and tell them that actually England invented the industrialized slave trade. So the idea that we had it easy on this island is very prevalent in America. And their story is so prevalent that black British people identify with the American story more than they identify or even know their own story, especially as it connects to Africa and to the Caribbean. If the Caribbean was like where Ireland is, I think we would have known about it, and I think slavery probably would have ended sooner. But because it was happening remotely, it's like sweatshops. I don't know what I'm wearing. I have no idea who made the stuff I'm wearing. I should, actually. And I could, if I wasn't so lazy. It's being made by somebody who's probably not getting paid very much, right? I'm part of that, but I don't see it. So if the sweatshop was in, Cricklewood High Road, I would probably want to shut that down and not buy anything from Matalan, But as it is, it's the same as slavery. They didn't know what was happening. And so when Americans say that nothing was going on in England, that you had it easy, it sticks in my craw so hard because it's like, it's different, but the Caribbean was sometimes worse. The massacres of people who rebelled, worse than you had in America. And also, they were not empowered in any way. They weren't allowed community. They couldn't even, some of them, when they got there, speak the same languages. Divide and rule, right? So that story's not really been told. We've skipped it, and we've talked about Windrush, and that's great. But it starts somewhere else. It's vital, I think, that we tell our black British stories, because they're untold still.
As a final question before we get on to our audience Q&A, so this story begins with the story of a boy who is born on a slave ship, but the kind of premise of this book is this idea that, if you're a white reader and you're reading expecting to see, whips and chains and brutal scenes, then this is not a book for you. But still, you remain faithful to some of the truth of the grit and difficulties that happen amongst his life. But you also have that balance with character and humor and of realism too. And what was your decision? How did you achieve this balance? And did you ever hold back in, describing more of the brutal, difficult details? And what were your reasons behind keeping or leaving things out?
It's that whole thing, 12 Years a Slave is a beautiful work of art, beautiful film, heartbreaking, beautiful. When you ask people, what was the name of the main guy? What was the name of Lupita Nyong'o's character? So the victimhood is so strong on them that we don't even remember who they were. So it was important to me to go, yeah, they're victims. What are they thinking? How do they feel about what's happening how do they articulate that? So important to humanize them rather than victimize them again. I don't know, 12 Years a Slave, it was that guy, Chiwetel Ejiofor. Yeah, that's the name of the actor. What's the name of the guy? So that's, to me, was the important thing, to deal with the slavery, but also to deal with people who are articulate about being able to talk about it. So when they write letters to each other, Anne and Ignatius, I send her to Antigua and Barbados to look after an old aunt. And so she witnesses what's going on there. So it's the contrast with whatever oppression that he's suffering here, he's still pretty free. He knows he's free and a bit more privileged, but you get the contrast of what's actually happening, what he has escaped from, and what he wants to stop. And that was important to me, that they both could articulate what was going on. They weren't victims, although they are victims. They were also articulate about what their world was, and they were also sure about what they wanted to do to get out of it. Real people from the inside, not poor person, look what's happening to them. No, what do you feel about what's happening to you? Tell me. Have a voice now. That was important to me.